John drove. The engine rumbled beneath him, a constant reminder of his isolation. The American countryside whipped past, a blur of green and brown. He was a hunter, though not in the traditional sense. John sought knowledge, ancient whispers of secrets long forgotten. Myths called to him. Legends whispered his name.
I wasn't a young man, not anymore. My 30th birthday had passed with little fanfare. Just another year in a life dedicated to the pursuit of the unknown.
His face, reflected in the rearview mirror, was a roadmap of his obsession. Lines etched around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. His jaw was tight with the burden of his quest. John wasn't insane, not in the traditional sense. He knew the difference between reality and fantasy. But there was a pull, a magnetic draw towards the edges of the map, the places where stories began and ended in equal measure. He was drawn to them like a moth to a flame. And tonight, he could feel it. The hum of power, the thrum of something ancient and terrible. It vibrated in his bones, urging him forward. He was close. He could feel it. The town materialized from the mist like a phantom. Buildings stood hunched and skeletal against the dying light. Silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the mournful sigh of the wind. Even the crows seemed to avoid this place, their usual cacophony absent. John had heard the stories. Whispers passed from town to town like a curse. This place, they said, was haunted, a place where the veil between worlds wore thin, where shadows moved with a will of their own. Most people avoided it, their fear a tangible barrier, but fear was a language John understood.
I had built my life on the precipice of terror, staring into the abyss until it blinked back. This town, with its secrets and its silences, was just another mystery to unravel.
He parked his car at the edge of town, the engine ticking as it cooled. His heart pounded against his ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. He was a man on the edge of a discovery, a revelation that could change everything. The library stood at the edge of town, a monolith of crumbling stone and shattered glass. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The steps groaned under John's weight as he climbed. He pushed open the heavy oak door. The smell hit him first, musty books and decaying wood. The library was a labyrinth of towering bookshelves. The silence was absolute, broken only by John's breathing.
You seek the book, don't you?
Yes, I think so. But where is it?
Follow the path. It will reveal itself when the time is right.
With those words, the librarian vanished, leaving John alone with his thoughts and the eerie silence of the library. John stopped. His breath caught in his throat, his eyes drawn to a single book lying on a table in the center of the room. It was ancient, bound in what looked like human skin, its surface cracked and dry. No title marred its surface, no author's name whispered its secrets. It lay there, a silent sentinel in the heart of the forgotten library. He approached it cautiously, his hand hovering over the book as if it might burn him. The air around it felt different somehow, charged with a strange energy. It pulsed with a life of its own, a dark heart beating beneath its aged exterior.
I've seen many books in my lifetime, held the weight of history in my hands. But this one feels different. It's more than just a collection of words and pages. It's a living thing, whispering promises of forbidden knowledge.
He knew he shouldn't touch it. Every instinct screamed at him to turn away, to flee this place and never look back. But curiosity, that insatiable hunger for the unknown, had always been his downfall. The symbol was intricate, a series of interlocking lines and curves that seemed to writhe and shift before his eyes. It was vaguely familiar, something he had glimpsed in his research, a fleeting image in a forgotten text. But its meaning, its true significance, remained tantalizingly out of reach.
I think I've seen this before, but where?
John traced the symbol with his fingertip, his touch hesitant at first, then bolder as if drawn in by an unseen force. The air grew colder as he did so, the silence in the library deepening into an oppressive weight. He could feel eyes on him, watching from the shadows, but when he turned, there was nothing there.
It's a serpent coiled around a five-pointed star. Its eyes, they seem to bore into my soul.
He had stumbled upon something ancient and powerful, something that had no business seeing the light of day. Fear gnawed at the edges of his mind, but it was a distant thing, muted by his fascination. He had to know more. He had to understand the secrets this book held. The book pulsed beneath his touch, its energy seeping into his bones. He felt a strange sense of rightness, as if the book had called him.
I have to pull away, but I can't.
He tried to break the connection, but it was too late. The book held him fast, its power flowing through him. His mind raced with images and whispers. The drive back was a blur. Rain lashed against the windshield, mirroring the storm brewing inside John. The book lay on the passenger seat, a silent menace.
Almost home, just a little further.
His house, a ramshackle Victorian, loomed out of the darkness. John entered, the scent of damp wood washing over him.
This is it. No turning back now.
The book seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. Section 2. The Language of Shadows. The book was a labyrinth of cryptic symbols, faded ink swirling on parchment thin as human skin.
I found myself struggling to decipher its meaning. It was as if the book itself was resisting me, its secrets veiled in a language older than time.
He spent days hunched over the book, the outside world fading away as he delved deeper into its mysteries. He slept little, ate less, his obsession growing with each passing hour.
I began to hear whispers in the dead of night, faint voices murmuring my name from the shadows. My dreams were haunted by grotesque figures and landscapes of fire and ash.
He knew he was losing himself, but he couldn't stop. The book had him in its thrall. One passage, scrawled in the margins of a page detailing a ritual for communicating with the dead, caught his attention.
It spoke of a gateway, a thin place between worlds where the veil could be pierced, and it spoke of a price that had to be paid to cross over.
Section 3. The Ingredients of Dread. The ritual was simple, deceptively so. Black candles arranged in a specific geometric pattern, a circle of salt, a barrier against the forces he was about to unleash, and a single crimson thread representing the lifeblood of the offering.
I gathered the ingredients with a growing sense of unease, my hands trembling as I placed them on my desk. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end.
The thread was the final piece, a single strand of silk pulsing faintly in his hand. He knew instinctively what it represented, the price that had to be paid to open the gateway, a life for a life.
I stared at the thread, my reflection staring back from its crimson depths. I saw my own fear, my desperation, mirrored back at me. But I also saw a flicker of something else, a glimmer of dark excitement, a thrill of anticipation that sent a shiver down my spine.
Section 4. The First Whispers. The ritual began at the stroke of midnight. He lit the candles, their flames burning an unnatural shade of green in the still air. He poured the salt, the grains forming a perfect circle around him, a barrier against the unknown.
And then, with a deep breath, I picked up the crimson thread.
The air grew cold, the temperature plummeting as a bone-chilling wind swept through the room. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, coalescing into grotesque shapes that writhed and twisted just beyond the edge of his vision.
I began to chant, the words ancient and guttural ripped from the depths of my subconscious. The room pulsed with a growing energy, a sense of anticipation so thick I could almost taste it.
And then he heard it. A whisper, faint at first, then growing louder, echoing around the room.
It was a voice ancient and cold, filled with a hunger that chilled him to the bone.
He had opened the gateway, and something had answered his call. The ritual complete, John stood frozen, heart pounding against his ribs. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crackle of dying candles. The air crackled with residual energy, a line crossed.
I expected something, but there was nothing, just a lingering chill and the unsettling certainty I was no longer alone.
The days that followed were a blur of unease and growing dread. John went about his routine, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. But the feeling of being watched persisted. The whispers grew stronger, more insistent.
I'd be reading, lost in my research, when a voice, cold and breathy, would slither into my ear. I tried to rationalize them away, but a primal fear began to take root.
The house, once a sanctuary, now felt oppressive. Floorboards creaked beneath his feet when he was certain he was alone. Objects moved, misplaced, reappearing in strange locations. And always the shadows lingered, shifting at the edge of his vision. He found himself drawn back to the book, an irresistible pull. He'd stare at its aged cover, the symbol seeming to writhe and pulse.
I longed to open it, but a sliver of sanity held me back.
Despite his best efforts to resist, John found himself drawn back to the book time and again.
I began to neglect my work, my once meticulous notes now filled with frantic scribbles and nonsensical diagrams.
One night, unable to resist the siren song of the book any longer, he found himself back in his study, the book open on his desk. Driven by a force he no longer understood, John began to read.
Ancient entities, forgotten gods, monstrous beings lurking in the shadows, hungry for a taste of our world.
One night, as he stood before his bathroom mirror, shaving the stubble from his chin, he saw it. The manifestations became a nightly occurrence, each one more terrifying than the last.
I could no longer distinguish between reality and the hallucinations brought on by my lack of sleep and the influence of the book.
The spirits grew bolder, their attacks more violent and unpredictable. John knew he was reaching the point of no return.
I was a shadow of my former self, gaunt and hollow-eyed, consumed by the darkness that had taken root in my soul.
The book promised that this ritual would grant him control over the spirits, allowing him to banish them back to the abyss from which they had come. John's vision blurred.
The book, once a source of dread and fascination, lay open on the floor, its pages turning wildly as if caught in a hurricane.
He felt a searing pain, like molten metal coursing through his veins, as the spirits surged into him. The air crackled with raw power. The room pulsed with their malevolent energy, the temperature plummeting until frost formed on the walls. Silence descended upon the house.
The spirits, now free to roam the mortal realm, dispersed into the night, their laughter echoing through the empty rooms.
The house, once a place of quiet solitude, stood as a testament to John's folly. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the grimy windows, a figure emerged from the shadows.
It was the guardian of the book, bound to its will, its sole purpose to ensure that the cycle of darkness continued.
And then, with a final, chilling smile, it vanished into the morning light, carrying the book's darkness with it. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The storm, which had raged throughout the night, had finally subsided, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. Birdsong, tentative at first, began to fill the air, a stark contrast to the screams and whispers that had echoed through the night.
John's house, once a beacon of misguided ambition, stood silent and still. The windows, most of them shattered, stared out at the world like vacant eyes. The front door, ripped from its hinges, lay splintered on the porch, a silent testament to the forces that had been unleashed within.
Inside, the chaos remained. Papers and books lay scattered across the floor, furniture overturned, and shadows clung to the corners as if reluctant to relinquish their hold on the place. The air, thick with the stench of ozone and decay, hung heavy and oppressive. But the book was gone. The cursed tome, the catalyst for John's descent into madness, had vanished, leaving no trace of its presence save for the devastation it had wrought. Miles away, in a bustling city, a young woman browsed the shelves of a dusty antique shop. Her name was Sarah, an aspiring writer drawn to forgotten stories.
She paused, her gaze drawn to a leather-bound book on a high shelf. It was unassuming, devoid of any markings, yet Sarah felt an inexplicable pull towards it.
The shopkeeper, an old man with ancient eyes, watched her with a knowing smile.
"That one's been waiting for you," he rasped. "A real bargain it is, full of stories that are just dying to be told."
Sarah hesitated, unease battling with curiosity, but the pull was too strong to resist. She purchased the book, unaware of the darkness she invited. The cycle had begun anew.